For decades, climbers believed there were 14 mountains above 8,000 meters. Now, Nepal says there are 20. For decades, climbers believed something was absolute. There were 14 mountains on Earth higher than 8,000 meters, 14 peaks above the death zone where the human body begins to fail. Summiting all 14 became the ultimate achievement in mountaineering, a badge of honor that defined human limits. But now Nepal claims the world actually has 20. 6 new 8,000-meter mountains, same Himalayas, different rules. Why is Nepal rewriting mountaineering history, and why is the climbing world divided over it? The answer reveals something deeper about how we define achievement, who controls mountain records, and what happens when commerce collides with tradition. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what 8,000 meters really means. Above this altitude, the human body begins to fail. Oxygen drops to roughly a third of what's available at sea level. Judgment fades, coordination deteriorates. Every step becomes a calculated risk. This zone earned a brutal name, the death zone. At these altitudes, the human body cannot acclimatize. It can only survive temporarily. Every hour spent above 8,000 meters causes cellular damage. Muscles break down, blood thickens, the brain swells. For decades, only 14 mountains were believed to rise above this threshold, including giants like Mount Everest, 8,849 meters, K2, 8,611 meters, and Annapurna, 8,091 meters. These 14 peaks became mountaineering's ultimate challenge. Summiting all of them, completing what climbers call the 8,000ers, became the sport's most prestigious achievement. Only about 40 people in history have climbed all 14. It's rarer than summiting Everest, rarer than going to space, rarer than almost any other human achievement. The 14 8,000ers represent the absolute edge of human capability, a line that defined what was possible, until Nepal said that line was wrong. But now Nepal says there aren't 14 mountains above 8,000 meters. According to Nepalese authorities, 6 additional peaks exceed this threshold. These peaks aren't newly discovered mountains in the traditional sense. They're sub-summits, secondary peaks located on the same massive ridgelines as existing giants. Using modern measurement techniques and detailed topographic analysis, Nepal argues these points deserve full recognition as independent 8,000-meter mountains. The 6 proposed additions are 1. Yalung Kang, 8,505 meters, on the Kangchenjunga Massif. 2. Nuptse, 7,861 meters, though Nepal claims it's actually above 8,000 meters. 3. Manaslu East, 8,000 meters plus, on the Manaslu Massif. 4. Broad Peak Central, 8,011 meters, on the Broad Peak Massif. 5. Shishapangma Central, 8,008 meters, on the Shishapangma Massif. 6. Lhotse Middle, 8,410 meters, on the Lhotse Massif. If recognized, this would fundamentally change mountaineering's most sacred list. And this is where the controversy begins. Because height alone has never been enough to define a mountain. In mountaineering and geography, a summit isn't just defined by altitude, it's also defined by something called topographic prominence. How much a peak rises above the surrounding terrain before you have to descend to reach a higher summit. Think of prominence as a measure of independence. How distinct is this peak from its neighbors? Mount Everest, for example, has enormous prominence because it's the highest point on Earth. To reach any higher summit, you'd have to, well, you can't. There isn't one. But many of Nepal's newly proposed peaks rise only 50 to 100 meters above the connecting ridges to their parent mountains. Critics argue this would be like counting every bump on a mountain's spine as a separate summit. By traditional mountaineering standards, most of these peaks would be considered sub-peaks or shoulders of their parent mountains, not independent summits. The International Mountaineering and Climbing Federation, UIAA, has long used a prominence threshold of at least 300 meters to define an independent peak. Most of Nepal's proposed additions fall well below this standard. If you enjoy thoughtful stories about the world's most extreme and mysterious places, consider subscribing. New stories every week. Why this changes everything. If accepted, this wouldn't just change a list. It would fundamentally alter the meaning of climbing history itself. Consider Reinhold Messner, the first person to summit all 14 8,000ers, completed in 1986. His achievement is considered one of the greatest in mountaineering history. If Nepal's claims are accepted, did Messner actually complete the challenge, or did he only climb 14 of 20? What about the roughly 40 climbers who've since completed the 14 8,000ers? Do their achievements become incomplete? Do future climbers now need to summit 20 peaks to claim the title? The implications ripple outward. Records become uncertain. Who holds speed records for climbing all the 8,000ers? Does that record still count if the list was incomplete? Sponsorships are affected. Climbers raise hundreds of thousands of dollars based on attempting all 14 8,000ers. Sponsors invested in that specific achievement. Does the goalpost just moved? Historical achievements are questioned. Decades of climbing history would need to be reassessed. And in a sport where credibility is everything, uncertainty is dangerous. There's another reason this debate matters, one that critics say is the real motivation behind Nepal's claim. Mountaineering is big business. Each recognized 8,000-meter peak means new climbing permits. Nepal charges 11,000 per person for Everest permits, more expeditions, each bringing guides, porters, equipment, logistics, more international attention, driving tourism beyond just climbing. Nepal's economy depends heavily on mountain tourism. Everest alone generates tens of millions of dollars annually for the country. Critics accuse Nepal of expanding the list primarily to boost tourism revenue and international prestige. If 6 more peaks are officially recognized as 8,000ers, Nepal stands to gain. Additional permit fees from climbers seeking to complete the new list, increased expedition traffic to previously overlooked peaks, enhanced status as the premier destination for extreme mountaineering supporters counter that Nepal simply wants recognition for mountains that were always there, just overlooked or dismissed by Western mountaineering establishment. They argue the original 14 8,000ers were defined by European explorers and climbers who may not have given proper consideration to all peaks in the region. But the timing is suspicious. Nepal made this announcement as competition for mountain tourism intensifies. Pakistan is promoting its own 8,000ers, like K2 and Broad Peak. China controls access to the north side of Everest and other peaks. Is this about scientific accuracy or economic strategy? The climbing community is deeply divided. Those who oppose Nepal's claim argue, if we start counting every sub-peak above 8,000 meters, where does it stop? There could be 50 8,000ers. The term would become meaningless. The 14 8,000ers represent independent mountains with distinct climbing challenges. These new peaks are just shoulders of existing mountains. This is clearly about money. Nepal wants more permit fees and doesn't care about undermining decades of mountaineering tradition. Those who support Nepal's claim argue, altitude is altitude. If a peak rises above 8,000 meters, it qualifies. Western climbers don't get to decide which peaks count. Many of these peaks present significant technical challenges and deserve recognition as independent objectives. The original list was always somewhat arbitrary. Why is 300 meters of prominence the magic number? Who decided that? The middle ground. Some climbers suggest creating a new category, perhaps major 8,000ers, the original 14, and minor 8,000ers, the additional 6. This would acknowledge the altitude of the new peaks while preserving the historical significance of the original 14. But Nepal has shown little interest in compromise. They want full recognition for all 20 peaks. Let's look at one example to understand the technical debate. Lhotse Middle. Lhotse is the world's 4th highest mountain at 8,516 meters. It sits directly adjacent to Mount Everest, connected by the South Col at Lhotse, has three distinct summits. Lhotse Main, 8,516 meters, the primary peak, one of the original 14 8,000ers. Lhotse Middle, 8,410 meters, about 100 meters lower, connected by a narrow ridge. Lhotse Shar, 8,382 meters, the eastern summit. Nepal now wants to count Lhotse Middle as an independent 8,000er. But here's the problem. To climb Lhotse Middle, you essentially climb most of Lhotse Main's route, then traverse along the connecting ridge to the middle summit. The prominence, the amount Lhotse Middle rises above the connecting saddle to Lhotse Main, is only about 60 meters. By any traditional definition, this is a sub-peak, not an independent mountain. Yet because it exceeds 8,000 meters in absolute altitude, Nepal claims it qualifies. This same pattern repeats for most of the proposed additions: high altitude but minimal independence from parent peaks. This controversy reveals something deeper about modern mountaineering. Who has the authority to define what counts as a mountain? Historically, the climbing community itself, through organizations like the UIAA and through consensus among elite alpinists, determined these standards. But Nepal is asserting national sovereignty over the mountains within its borders. They're saying, "These are our mountains, we'll define them." It's a clash between traditional mountaineering standards, emphasizing prominence and independence, governmental authority, emphasizing altitude and national interest, commercial interests, emphasizing tourism and revenue. And there's no clear mechanism to resolve it. The UIAA can issue position statements, but they have no enforcement power. Climbers can refuse to recognize the new peaks, but they can't stop Nepal from issuing permits and claiming international status. This is uncharted territory in mountaineering governance. To understand this controversy fully, you need to understand how the original 14 8,000ers were defined. The list wasn't created through any formal process. It emerged gradually as surveyors mapped the Himalayas and Karakoram in the 19th and early 20th centuries. British, German, and Italian expeditions identified the highest peaks, measured their elevations with varying accuracy, and attempted to summit them. By the 1950s, when serious attempts on 8,000ers began, the list of 14 was generally accepted, but it was never officially codified by any international body. The 14 8,000ers became established through practice and consensus, not through any legal or scientific process. So in some sense, Nepal's challenge asks, why should we be bound by a list created by foreign explorers a century ago, using less accurate measurement techniques? It's a fair question, but the counter-argument is equally valid. 14 8,000ers represent a specific mountaineering challenge that has meaning precisely because it's been consistent for decades. Changing it retroactively undermines that meaning. What this means for future climbers. If Nepal's claims are officially recognized, by whom remains unclear, what happens next? Scenario 1. The climbing community ignores it. Most climbers continue pursuing the original 14 8,000ers. The 20 peaks become a footnote, recognized by Nepal but not by the broader mountaineering world. This seems most likely. Tradition and consensus carry enormous weight in climbing culture. Scenario 2. A split system emerges. Some climbers pursue the 14 classic 8,000ers. Others pursue the 20 Nepalese 8,000ers. Different record books, different achievements. This could fragment the climbing community and dilute the significance of both challenges. Scenario 3. Nepal's definition becomes accepted. Over time, especially as new generations of climbers emerge, the 20-peak list becomes standard. Past achievements are reassessed. The climbing world adapts to the new definition. This seems least likely, but commercial pressure could drive it. Expedition companies might promote the new challenge to attract clients. The bigger problem. This controversy reveals something deeper than just a dispute over mountain definitions. It shows how mountaineering, once the domain of elite alpinists pursuing pure exploration, has become increasingly commercialized and politicized. Mountains have become economic assets, generating tourism revenue, national symbols, sources of pride and international status, commercial products marketed to wealthy adventure tourists. The original spirit of mountaineering, testing yourself against nature, pushing human limits, has been complicated by these other interests. And as technology improves and commercial pressure grows, fundamental questions become harder to answer. Who decides where a mountain begins and ends? Who has authority over mountaineering records and definitions? What's the balance between tradition and new information? How do we preserve meaningful challenges while acknowledging that old definitions might have been flawed? There are no easy answers. The irony. Here's what's perhaps most ironic about this controversy. The mountains themselves haven't changed at all. Lhotse Middle has stood at 8,410 meters for millennia. Yalungkang has been 8,505 meters since long before humans could measure it. The peaks are exactly where they've always been, exactly as high as they've always been. What's changed is us. Our measurement techniques, our definitions, our economic interests, our desire to categorize and quantify achievement. The mountains remain indifferent to whether we count them as 14 or 20. They don't care about prominence thresholds or international recognition. They simply exist, dangerous, beautiful, and utterly unmoved by human debate. Tyther's final thoughts. Nepal's claim may never be universally accepted. The UIAA will likely maintain the traditional 14 8,000ers as the standard. Most elite climbers will continue pursuing that challenge. Record books will probably stay unchanged. But the controversy won't disappear either. As measurement technology improves, as commercial pressures intensify, as different nations assert authority over their mountains, these questions will keep arising. And perhaps that's okay. Perhaps it's healthy for the mountaineering community to occasionally question its assumptions, to reassess old definitions, to consider whether tradition should always trump new information. The 14 8,000ers will remain one of mountaineering's greatest challenges, regardless of what Nepal claims. But the debate reminds us that even in a sport defined by objective physical achievement, climbing to measurable heights on real mountains, there's still subjective judgment involved. Because mountains are more than just their measured elevation. They're the stories we tell about them, the challenges they represent, the meaning we assign to summiting them, and those meanings will always be subject to debate, to change, to the evolving relationship between humans and the peaks we're compelled to climb. One thing is clear: the mountains haven't changed. We have. And as humans keep pushing higher, even the rules we once believed were unmovable are starting to shift. The precedent this sets. But there's another dimension to this controversy that hasn't been discussed enough: the precedent it sets. If Nepal can unilaterally expand the list of 8,000ers, what stops other nations from doing the same? Pakistan could claim that certain sub-peaks on K2 or Broad Peak deserve independent status. China could assert that peaks on the Tibetan side of the Himalayas have been undercounted. India could make similar claims for peaks in its territory. We could end up with competing lists of 8,000ers, each promoted by different countries for their own interests. This would fracture mountaineering into national camps, undermining the international cooperation and shared standards that have historically defined the sport. Imagine a world where Nepal recognizes 28,000ers, Pakistan recognizes 18, including some Nepal doesn't count. China recognizes 22, including peaks on the Tibetan Plateau. The international climbing community recognizes 14. Which list is correct? How do climbers navigate these competing claims? How are records kept? The controversy over Nepal's 6 additional peaks could be just the beginning of a much larger fragmentation of mountaineering standards. The measurement problem. Part of what makes this debate so complex is that measuring mountains is harder than it sounds. You'd think altitude would be objective. Either a peak is above 8,000 meters or it isn't. But mountain measurement involves numerous technical challenges. Where exactly is sea level? The reference point for all altitude measurements varies depending on location and gravitational variations. The geoid, the model of Earth's sea level, isn't uniform. Where exactly is the summit? On some mountains, the highest point shifts as snow accumulates or melts. On others, determining which rock outcrop is truly highest requires precise surveying. How do you measure prominence? Calculating how much a peak rises above surrounding terrain requires identifying the lowest contour line that connects to higher ground. This is straightforward for isolated peaks, but extremely complex for peaks on long ridgelines. Modern technology, GPS, satellite imagery, laser scanning, has made measurements more accurate, but it's also revealed that some historical measurements were wrong. Mount Everest's height has been remeasured multiple times, with the official elevation changing from 8,848 meters to 8,849 meters in 2020 after a joint Nepal-China survey. If we're revising measurements of the world's most famous mountain, why shouldn't we revise the entire list of 8,000ers? It's a valid question, but it opens a Pandora's box. Because if every improved measurement leads to reconsidering which peaks qualify, the list could change repeatedly as technology improves. At some point, you need stability. The climbing community needs a consistent target, even if that target is based on slightly imperfect information. What other countries are saying? Nepal isn't alone in making controversial mountain claims. In 2010, Pakistan briefly claimed that K2 should be measured from a different point, potentially making it taller than previously recorded. The claim was later withdrawn after international pushback. In 2020, China and Nepal jointly announced a new official height for Mount Everest, 8,000 instead of 8,000 for Platanos. While this was a minor change, it demonstrated how nations increasingly view mountain measurements as matters of national sovereignty rather than purely scientific questions. Russia has made claims about peaks in the Caucasus and Pamirs that challenge Western classifications. Some Russian sources list different numbers of 7,000ers, peaks above 7 meters, than international sources. The pattern is clear. As nationalism intersects with mountaineering, objective standards become contested. This isn't necessarily malicious. Nations have legitimate interests in accurately surveying their territory, and historical measurements by Western expeditions may indeed have overlooked or miscategorized peaks. But it does create a governance problem. If every country can unilaterally redefine which peaks qualify for significant mountaineering milestones, the shared standards that give those milestones meaning begin to erode. The commercial pressure. Let's be honest about what's really driving much of this: money. A climbing permit for Mount Everest costs $11 per person. Multiply that by several hundred climbers per season, and you're talking about millions of dollars just in permit fees, not counting the additional economic activity from expedition logistics, guide services, and porter fees. If Nepal can successfully establish 6 more 8,000ers, they create 6 more premium climbing destinations that can command high permit fees. Even if these peaks attract only a fraction of Everest's traffic, the revenue potential is significant. And unlike Everest, which Nepal shares with China, several of the proposed new 8,000ers are entirely within Nepalese territory, giving Nepal full control over permits and revenue. This is about creating new product offerings in the adventure tourism market. And it's not just Nepal doing this. The entire mountaineering industry has become increasingly commercialized. Expedition companies now offer guided packages to multiple 8,000ers, targeting wealthy clients who want to complete the challenge. Sponsors invest heavily in climbers attempting all 14 peaks, looking for marketing opportunities. Documentary filmmakers follow climbers on their quests, creating media franchises around 8,000er attempts. Equipment manufacturers use 8,000er climbs to test and promote their gear. All of these commercial interests benefit from expanding the challenge. More peaks mean more expeditions, more sponsorship opportunities, more documentaries, more gear sales. The climbing community's resistance to Nepal's claims might be less about principle and more about protecting existing commercial investments in the 14-peak challenge. The environmental cost. There's another angle to this story that often gets overlooked: the environmental impact of increased climbing traffic. The current 14 8,000ers already face serious environmental problems: trash accumulation at camps and en routes, human waste contamination of snow and glaciers, erosion from repeated foot traffic, disruption of local ecosystems. Mount Everest's environmental degradation has become so severe that Nepal now requires climbers to bring down a minimum amount of trash or forfeit their deposit. If 6 more peaks are officially recognized as 8,000ers, climbing traffic to those mountains will increase, potentially by a lot. Peaks that were previously obscure objectives attempted by only the most dedicated climbers could become crowded highways as hundreds of climbers add them to their 8,000er checklist. The environmental consequences could be significant: increased need for fixed ropes and ladders, which become permanent installations, more camps established with associated trash and human waste, greater helicopter traffic for rescues and logistics, disruption to previously pristine alpine environments. Environmental groups have already raised concerns about the commercialization of the existing 14 8,000ers. Expanding the list could amplify these problems considerably. The cultural perspective. For many Himalayan communities, these mountains aren't just climbing challenges or economic assets, they're sacred. Many peaks have deep spiritual significance to local Buddhist and Hindu populations. Certain mountains are considered homes of deities or sites of religious importance. The debate over counting peaks and sub-peaks might seem abstract to international climbers, but to local communities, it can feel like outsiders arguing over how to categorize their sacred landscapes. Interestingly, local Sherpa and other mountain communities are divided on Nepal's claims. Some support it as a way to bring more recognition and economic opportunity to their regions. More climbing traffic means more work as guides and porters, more business for local lodges and services. Others worry about increased environmental damage and the further commercialization of mountains they view as sacred. They've watched Everest transform from a revered peak into a commercial circus, and they don't want to see the same thing happen to other mountains. This cultural dimension adds another layer of complexity to the debate. It's not just about mountaineering standards or economic interests. It's about how different cultures relate to mountains and who has the authority to define them. What happens next? So where does this controversy go from here? In the short term, probably nowhere. Nepal will continue claiming 20 8,000ers. The international mountaineering community will likely continue recognizing 14. Two parallel realities will coexist, but several factors could force a resolution. International pressure. If enough climbers, expedition companies, and mountaineering organizations push back, Nepal might compromise, perhaps accepting the peaks as sub-8,000ers or creating a separate category. Economic incentives. If international climbers refuse to pursue Nepal's additional 6 peaks, the economic benefit Nepal seeks won't materialize. This could prompt reconsideration. Scientific consensus. If independent geographic and surveying organizations weigh in with clear standards for what constitutes an independent peak, it could create pressure for Nepal to align with those standards. Precedent from other disputes. How similar controversies are resolved in other mountain ranges could set precedents for the Himalayas, but resolution may never come. The climbing world might simply have to live with ambiguity. Some people recognizing 14 8,000ers, others recognizing 20, with no definitive answer to which is correct. The human element. Lost in all this debate about measurements, definitions, and economics is the human element. What does this mean for the climbers themselves? For someone who has spent years, perhaps decades, working toward climbing all the 8,000ers, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, risking their life repeatedly, sacrificing time with family, Nepal's announcement must be devastating. Imagine being one climb away from completing the challenge, only to be told the finish line just moved, that what you thought was 14 peaks is now 20, that your achievement when you complete it will always have an asterisk. For climbers who have already completed all 14, there's the question of legacy. Does their achievement become diminished? Do they need to go back and climb the 6 additional peaks to maintain their status? Some might view this as an opportunity, a chance to take on new challenges, but others might feel betrayed, as if the rules changed after they finished the game. The human dimension, the impact on individual climbers who've dedicated their lives to this pursuit, deserves more consideration in the debate. These aren't just abstract questions about definitions, they're questions that affect real people who've made extraordinary sacrifices to achieve something they believed was clearly defined. Final thoughts. Nepal's claim that there are 20 8,000ers instead of 14 has exposed fault lines in mountaineering that have been developing for years. The commercialization of extreme climbing, the tension between tradition and new information, the question of who has authority to define mountaineering achievements, the intersection of national interests with international sports. None of these issues are new. But Nepal's controversial expansion of the 8,000ers has brought them all into sharp focus. And perhaps that's valuable, even if the controversy never resolves. Because it forces the climbing community to confront uncomfortable questions. Why do we define peaks the way we do? Who benefits from those definitions? What happens when economic interests conflict with sporting tradition? How do we balance local sovereignty with international standards? These questions matter beyond just the 8,000ers. They affect how we approach mountaineering as a whole in an era of increasing commercialization and climate change. The mountains themselves remain indifferent to our debates. They've stood for millions of years and will stand for millions more, regardless of whether we count them as 14 or 20 or 50. But how we define, approach, and manage these mountains says something about us, about our values, our priorities, and what we believe mountaineering should be. Nepal's claim may be rejected by most of the climbing world, or it may slowly gain acceptance as a new generation of climbers emerges without attachment to the traditional 14. Either way, the controversy has already changed. Something fundamental. The certainty that there were 14 8,000ers, a fact that seemed as solid as the mountains themselves, has been revealed as more negotiable than anyone imagined. And once you realize the rules can change, you start to question all the other assumptions you've been taking for granted. Subscribe if you want to understand the risks, politics, and psychology behind the world's most dangerous mountains. News stories every week.